logic of fear. Our daily lives often place us at the crossroads of conflict and reconciliation. We are invited to begin with disarming our hearts, renouncing resentment, fear, and indifference, and choosing instead the path of encounter, compassion, and truth. Just a few months ago, we celebrate the 60th anniversary of Nostra Aetate, a prophetic document whose message is still strikingly relevant. On this occasion, on 28th of October, Pope Leo XIV recalled that dialogue is not a tactic or a tool, but a way of life, a journey of the heart that transforms everyone involved, the one who listens and the one who speaks. And this path is not walked by setting aside our own faith, but by remaining deeply rooted in it. Genuine dialogue does not arise from dilution or compromise, but from the clarity and strength of our own convictions, which allow us to reach out to others with love. In every religious tradition, women of faith have been pillars of hope and guardians of peace. Their stories of perseverance, prayer, service, and dedication sustain us today. To mention some examples, Miriam, a reference in Judaism, sang freedom into the hearts of a newly liberated people. In Islam, Khadija, whose wisdom and courage supported the Prophet in moments of uncertainty. In Hinduism, the figure of Sita, who embodies steadfastness and moral strength. In Christianity, we have countless women, mothers, mystics, martyrs, and missionaries who have carried the gospel into place of suffering and despair. Indeed, when we think about our own mothers and sisters in their various roles as housewives, teachers, politicians, and leaders of many associations, women who have spent and continue to spend their time building families and societies based on human and religious values, we realize that peace is not passive. It is an active, courageous, and often costly commitment. In today's world, peace is not an abstract ideal, but a daily commitment to dialogue, solidarity, and the protection of human dignity. Our hope for peace should be rooted in the conviction that God accompanies humanity and that every act of goodness contributes to healing our world. As we gather today, may we draw inspiration from the radiant witness of many women of faith. May our hearts grow closer across religious traditions, weaving bonds of understanding and peace. And may we walk together toward the disarmament of heart, mind, and life that opens the path to true and integral human development. I thank you once again for this opportunity. I express my gratitude to Ms. Monica Santamarina and the World Union of Catholic Women's Organization, and to all the women who will share with us their wisdom today. May the God of peace bless your efforts and fill your hearts with hope, so that together we may build a more fraternal, just, and peaceful world. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Eminence, for these very encouraging and inspiring words, and for reminding us that we should start by disarming our hearts. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Now I would like to give the floor to Monica Santamarina, WUCWO's President General. So Monica, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lavinia. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, Your Eminence, distinguished speakers, dear friends. On behalf of the World Union of Catholic Women's Organizations, I warmly welcome each of you to this interreligious and ecumenical encounter under the theme Women of Faith, bearers of peace and hope. I extend my heartfelt gratitude to His Eminence, Cardinal Kubakat, Prefect for the Dicastery for Interreligious Dialogue, for his presence and constant encouragement. Thank you as well to all our distinguished speakers who have generously accepted our invitation. I am certain that your wisdom and lived experiences will enlighten and inspire us all. Today's gathering is part of a journey that began several years ago. Since 2019, WUCWO has celebrated International Women's Day through an interreligious and ecumenical dialogue path with women leaders of different faith traditions. In 2020, we began collaborating closely with the Dicastery for Interreligious Dialogue in this shared commitment. Throughout these years, this meeting has always been more than a conference. It has been a space of reflection, openness, and sisterhood, a symbol of unity, unity as members of one human family, and unity as women committed to peace and encounter. We have discovered that women of faith meet. When they meet, we do not separate the intellectual from the emotional, the public from the private, the religious from the social, the professional from the familial. Our lives are integrated, certainly complicated, full, and deeply rooted in our faith, and so is our dialogue. And this is precisely where its strength lies. Sadly, as we gather today, the world is increasingly living in uncertainty, conflict, and suffering. Just days ago, during the Angelus, Pope Leo XIV expressed deep concern over the recent events in the Middle East and Iran. He reminded us that stability and peace are not built with mutual threats, nor with weapons that sow destruction and death, but only through reasonable, authentic, and responsible dialogue. He has made peace a central theme of his pontificate, calling for an unarmed and disarming peace, a humble and persevering peace that begins in the heart. As he reminded us in his message of peace for 2026, peace exists. It wants to dwell within us. It has the gentle power to enlighten and expand our understanding. It resists and overcomes violence. Let us welcome it and recognize it, rather than believing it to be impossible and beyond our reach. Many people sincerely long for peace, but they feel powerless before the complexity of global events. Some propose violence as a solution. As women of faith and hope, we are convinced that peace is possible and that we must never resign ourselves to conflict. We reinforce our prayers and daily efforts, knowing that we can help rediscover the path to reconciliation. As women of faith and protagonists in the world, we know that peace ultimately is not a word or a vague desire. It is not an abstract promise. It is a concrete mission. It is an act of love that must be carried out every day and everywhere. We are thus called to be women leaders who build bridges and educate for peace in our families and our communities. Women who promote and live interreligious and ecumenical dialogue, who care for creation as our common home, who defend life, the dignity of every person, and protect especially the most vulnerable, who work for religious freedom, non-discrimination, women leadership, and a culture of encounter. Our service, often silent but persistent and brave, is already a concrete way of building the unarmed and disarming peace of which Pope Leo speaks. This is the journey that Nostra Aetate invites us to continue, to walk together in hope. As the Holy Father reminded us, when we do, something beautiful happens. Hearts open, bridges are built, and new paths appear where none seemed possible. This is not the work of one religion, one nation, or even one generation. It is a sacred task for all humanity to keep hope alive, to keep dialogue alive, and to keep love alive in the heart of the world. To conclude, promoting dialogue between cultures and religions is not optional. It is essential. To be women of dialogue means to remain deeply rooted in our own faith traditions while cultivating openness, attentive listening, and respect for those who come from different backgrounds. Always placing the human person, human dignity, and our relational and communal nature at the center. Participation in interreligious dialogue recognizes that religion is not merely private, but it is a social value. Religion at its heart speaks of connection. When authentically lived, it enhances relationships and helps societies flourish. And how urgently today we need to reaffirm the value of authentic human relationships, relationships that resist division, polarization, and indifference. We represent today an interreligious network of women cultivating encounter among peoples, peace and hope. An authentic encounter is a path to face our common challenges with hope. We committed ourselves to educate, to act together for peace, to amplify women's leadership, and to model a manner of dialogue marked by presence, humility, resilience, and gentle strength. As a mother, a grandmother, a woman of faith, I choose dialogue over suspicion, encounter over bitter division, forgiveness over resentment, what unites us over what separates us, hope over resignation, peace over conflict. May these encounters strengthen our shared commitment. May it renew our courage. And may we continue to walk together across traditions, cultures, religions, and continents as bearers of peace and hope for a wounded yet beloved world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Monica. Now, let's move on to the panel. We will begin with the Islamic perspective, with a reflection from Dunya Elemender. Dunya is a political scientist from Germany who has been committed to interreligious dialogue since her youth. She currently serves as chairperson of the Christian Islamic Society in Germany, and her work focuses on bringing people of different faiths together so that they may encounter one another as fellow human beings who share the same desire for peace and harmony. So thank you for being with us today, Dunya. From your point of view, how can women of faith actively involve and inspire young generations in the mission of hope and encounter, ensuring that their commitment contributes to building a culture of peace and solidarity? Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Lavinia. Dear Cardinal Kovacat, dear Miss Monica Santamarina, ladies and gentlemen, dear sisters and brothers. Today we gather to reflect on the role of women of faith as bearers of peace and hope. Given recent events around the world, this is not an easy topic. When we look at our global reality, we see war, injustice, hatred, and mistrust. In our search for security, we sometimes convince ourselves that harming others is necessary so that they cannot harm us. We form exclusive groups and tell ourselves that we are safe only among our own. Those in power have often encouraged the belief that if we eliminate or weaken the other, they will no longer threaten us. And so we enter a dangerous cycle. We fear that if others gain power, they might do to us what we have done to them. It becomes a vicious cycle, and in the end, we all lose. So we must ask ourselves, is this truly how we want to live? Is this how we want to raise our children in fear and suspicion of others? Is this the world we want to hand over to the next generations? I believe we all know the answer. To break this cycle, we need a moral courage that goes beyond political calculations. We need the courage to forgive, the courage to build bridges, and the courage to rehumanize those whom conflict has turned into the other. In the Quran, God offers a powerful reminder about the transformative strength of forgiveness. In Surah 49, verse 40, God says, "And the retribution of an evil act is an evil one like it. But whoever pardons and makes reconciliation, his reward is from Allah. Indeed, He does not like wrongdoers." This verse acknowledges human emotions, anger, hurt, the instinct for retaliation, but it encourages us to aim higher. Forgiveness is not presented as a weakness, it is a sacred act, a path to divine reward, a way to end cycles of harm. Yet forgiveness alone is not enough. We also need solidarity, a deep, active sense of responsibility for one another. And here, women have a unique spiritual role. Women carry stories, women carry families, women carry communities through crisis. Across cultures and faith, women are often the first to build bonds that cross divides. We comfort, we mediate, we protect, we reach out. Even in times of conflict, women often keep the human fabric intact. This is why the Quran described the power of responding to hostility not with more hostility, but with moral excellence. In Surah 41, verse 34, God tells us, "And not equal are the good deed and the bad. Repel evil with that which is better, and the one between whom and you was enmity will become as though he was a devoted friend." This verse is extraordinary. It tells us that hostility can be transformed into friendship, that enemies can become allies, that with patience, compassion, and perseverance, hardened hearts can soften. Women of faith understand this deeply, not just as an idea, but as a lived reality. We practice forgiveness in daily life, in our families, in our communities, and in the spaces where conflicts touches us more directly. We build solidarity not through grand declarations, but through small, consistent acts of care and presence. We remind society that peace is not merely the absence of war, it is the presence of justice, empathy, and shared dignity. Today, as violence and division rise in many parts of the world, we need the gentle but determined leadership of women more than ever, a leadership rooted not in domination, but in healing, not in exclusion, but in connection, not in fear, but in the trust and the divine call to mercy. Let us therefore stand as witnesses of hope. Let us embody solidarity that reaches beyond group boundaries. Let us choose forgiveness even when it is difficult, especially when it is difficult. Because every act of compassion breaks a cycle of hatred a little more. Even gesture of solidarity weakens the walls we have built around ourselves. And every moment of forgiveness opens the door to a different future. We do this not only for ourselves, but for those who will come after us, for the children who deserve to grow up without inherited fear, for the young people who should not carry the burden of past conflicts, for the next generation who look to us for guidance and how to live with courage, dignity, and mercy. If we plant the seeds of forgiveness today, they will harvest peace tomorrow. If we model solidarity now, they will inherit a world that is more just, more human, and more compassionate. May we be among those who chose to begin this work so that the generations after us may live in the light of peace we helped to create. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dunya, for underlining that breaking this cycle of fear and hostility begins with the courage to forgive and the commitment to rehumanize one another. Thank you. moving on for the Buddhist perspective, we have with us today Dr. Sharika Marasinghe from Sri Lanka. She's a human rights lawyer and scholar with a doctorate in international law from the University of Oxford. She has dedicated over 4 decades to child protection, women's rights, and peace building through legal work and community initiatives. Thank you for being with us, Sharika. I ask you, what concrete steps led by women can religious traditions take to cultivate hope and promote peace rooted in justice and human dignity? The floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Lavinia, Your Eminence Cardinal George Jacob, Dr. Monica, distinguished panelists and peace-loving participants. We are deliberating on the theme Women in Faith, Bearers of Peace and Hope amidst an imminent threat of despair and conflict. This moment stands as a litmus test for us women of faith to test our innate capacity to endure pain and suffering with infinite love, compassion, forgiveness, and equanimity without abandoning our sacred responsibility to foster peace and hope in a divided and fractured humanity. At this hour, humanity stands at a critical crossroads with baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, Gen Z, and Gen Alpha, who are all navigating the same global interchange, yet they are guided by vastly different political, economic, social, and cultural reference points that do not always resonate harmoniously with one another. What is particularly striking is that Gen Z and Gen Alpha are shaped less by wholesome spiritual cultural traditions and more by the rapidly expanding cyber world, including artificial intelligence. Their conscience is increasingly influenced by digital realities rather than real-life, sense-based, human-centered experiences. For them, virtual interaction often carries more authority than direct human encounter. Meanwhile, the structures of power across the globe continue to be shaped largely by leaders from the baby boomers, Gen X, millennial generations. As humble women citizens of the world, we are compelled to acknowledge a sobering reality. The capitalist and socialist ideologies that have dominated political and economic discourse, largely shaped within patriarchal frameworks, have not succeeded in eliminating poverty, illiteracy, illness, polarization, discrimination, violence, ethnic and religious conflicts. Often these systems have compounded the very crises they sought to resolve. Therefore, the most opportune time has arrived for women of all faith traditions to offer the world a feminine roadmap, one rooted not in domination, but in shared power, not in division, but in unity, not in violence, but in peace. From the smallest social unit of the family to the national and international spheres of authority, a new paradigm is urgently needed. As women of faith, we are called to articulate spiritual frameworks that transcend divides, disparities, frameworks that safeguard the right to life and dignity, not only for human beings, but also for fauna, flora, and the very air we breathe. Women of faith must carry this philosophy of humanity from the intimacy of the home to the corridors of power at national and international levels, spaces where decisions affecting millions are often made by a few who, through ignorance or false sense of certainty, assume they alone know what is best for others. Humanity is engulfed in a serious psychological disease that has created imbalance and alienation, precipitated by the endless craving to acquire more power, conquer more territory, to segregate peace-loving people through racism and religious extremism, to destroy age-old wholesome spiritual and cultural values by promoting the false value of ultra-modernity, to destroy the already endangered ecosystem and natural environment, to acquire more wealth and power, and to make people believe that the accumulation of wealth is the ultimate goal of being human and the one and only measure of human success. As taught by the Buddha, craving is the seamstress, for it weaves one being regenerated from the past into the future, from one state of existence to another. More than 2,500 years ago, the Buddha identified three fundamental forms of craving: craving for sensual pleasure, craving for existence, craving for non-existence. These arise through the six sense doors: the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind, contact with external sense objects, giving rise to feelings and consciousness. If we are to extinguish the fires of destructive craving for power, for wealth, for domination, we must cultivate mindful awareness and clear comprehension. To extinguish the fires of craving, the Buddha offered the noble eightfold path: right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. This ancient wisdom is not an abstract philosophy. It is a living, practical roadmap. Sarvodaya Vishwa Niketan International Peace Center has sought to translate this wisdom into action. For those unfamiliar with the Sarvodaya movement of Sri Lanka, Sarvodaya means awakening of all. For more than 67 years, it has transformed lives in over 15,000 villages across Sri Lanka, transcending man-made ideological barriers through cultivation of loving kindness, compassionate action, altruistic joy, equanimity, alongside the Gandhian principles of truth, nonviolence, and self-denial. For nearly 3 decades, Vishwaniketan, the spiritual heart of Sarvodaya, has advanced a holistic vision entitled Healing the Mind, Healing Society, and Healing the Environment. The journey begins at the very inception with the unborn. Through the holistic approach to motherhood, thousands of mothers and fathers are guided to cultivate wholesome thoughts and feelings during pregnancy, recognizing that consciousness is shaped even in the mother's womb. By blending timeless wisdom traditions with contemporary findings in prenatal and psychology and neuroscience, this program nurtures infants who grow up to protect humanity and the natural world. Vishwaniketan extends this philosophy to the younger generations, Gen Z, Alpha, and soon Beta. The very naming of these generations reflects rapid change and ideological shifts that challenge us deeply as women of faith. Through the 3S mindful spiritual retreats, searching the self, serving society, and saving the environment, children aged 3 to 18 from normal family settings and children from Sarvodaya institutional care are guided to journey inward with mindfulness, loving kindness, and compassionate actions. These retreats have also become powerful spaces of healing for teenage mothers who have experienced sexual and gender-based violence. Through trauma-informed, trauma-sensitive mindfulness practices, they learn to recognize despair, anger, hatred, and impulses of self-harm, and to emerge from cycles of self-blame and self-destruction with dignity and strength. Befrienders of Awakening is the latest gift of Vishwaniketan to the world. It helps women of faith equip themselves with psychosocial tools and trauma-informed, trauma-sensitive practices of mindfulness-based stress reduction and cognitive therapy, and inspires them to awaken the total personality of Gen Z, Gen Alpha, and Gen Beta within the mother's womb, enhancing their spiritual resilience to navigate the rough tides precipitated by natural and man-made crises and disasters. May you all be blessed with good health and well-being as you become bearers of hope and peace for present and future generations. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarika, for giving us this example, this important example of this program in Sri Lanka. Seems very important and also for younger generations. Very much for that insightful presentation. Now, moving on, I will now give the floor to Swamini Shuddhananda Giri. She is an Italian Hindu nun and a well-known representative and vice president of the Italian Hindu Union. She lives and works at the Mata Jikananda Ashram, where she is actively engaged in interreligious dialogue, educational initiatives, and the promotion of Hindu culture. So, Shuddhananda, from your perspective, what practical initiatives can women within religious communities lead to foster hope and build a culture of peace?
Namaste. Thank you very much for the kind invitation. And His Eminence Cardinal Kokowad, Dr. Monica, and all friends and sisters, I'm very happy to meet you again. I think today globalization has brought about a new, very strong enemy, that is fear, which is a direct consequence of lack of knowledge. Because today in the same city and in the same village, multiple religious and ethnic communities coexist, often without knowing each other, or worse, knowing each other through mean narratives of textbook, media, and other similar means, but not directly. And we know very well that media many times creates a barrier, and not bridges. So I think it's very important to recreate this kind of a relationship, person to person, heart to heart, to overcome this knowledge, to overcome these barriers. Knowledge, I think, is very fundamental, is essential. It transcends prejudices and stereotypes that build walls and fuel mistrust. This coexistence, if it succeeds in overcoming, if it succeeds in overcoming the danger of ghettoization, foster mutual intercultural processes leading to a reciprocal enrichment. So I think that from the Hindu perspective, we have to draw attention on an emphasis on the concept of ahimsa and karuna, the compassion. Ahimsa is non-violence, to promote understanding and empathy. And so I think, and we try to be engaged in active listening and dialogue with women from other faiths, seeking common ground and shared values. Organize community events and service projects that bring people together, fostering connections and breaking down barriers. Because many times we don't have the time, we don't have the space where we can create this kind of meeting, this kind of knowledge process. And I think it's very important, as it has been said also from Dr. Monica, we and other sisters, because women bring with them also stories, experiences, traditions. And I think it's very important to highlight our shared humanity and the power of faith to overcome differences. By doing so, we can help create a culture of encounter where everyone feels valued and respected. Of course, it's not simple, it's not easy, it's a very tough, it's very difficult in these nowadays. But in face of war and social instability, we can draw attention on another aspect of Hindu scriptures, that is Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, to remind us that we are a unique big family. The world is one family. And also another important concept brought out from the scripture is Loka Sangraha. It's a Sanskrit, of course, a Sanskrit word that it means the welfare, the well-being of all. And when I say all, I mean all beings, also animal, plants, nature, because we have to also come back to the sacrality of the whole entire world or entire manifestation. And we see the creation and the manifestation as aspect of God, the unique God that is our, our big friend. So in this scenario, religions can illuminate moral gems to create a mosaic of fraternity, smooth out dissonances, and transform conflict into harmonious polyphony. I like very much a verse as life is the heart of encounter. Encounter implies a proactive movement toward our others, a call to shape our lives like a sculpture with clay. Art requires dedication and discipline to make our lives a work of art aimed at the common good, lokakshema, as I said. We need constant application of virtue, of dharma, we can say in Sanskrit language, the eternal law. I like to remember the theologian Raymond Peinikar when we spoke about dharma as a threefold cosmo-theandric dimension, a relationship between humans, the cosmos, and God. And creating a culture of encounter cannot ignore this triple responsibility that each person has towards themselves, others, and God. The Rig Veda, one of the most important scriptures for Hindus, says, I quote, "Unite your intentions, unite your hearts, may your spirits be united, may you live long in unity and harmony." The core of Hindu thought is unity, union between all living beings, from the atom to the mountain. Dharma is not a theological concept, but rather expresses the presence of God in the universe. It is the golden rule, the need for love. As much it is in the heart of human being, eternal and a part of existence itself, without geographical or anthropological connotation. It is a universal principle. It is therefore the basis of encounter. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shudanand. I would underline your drawing attention on the fact that fear is often due to the lack of knowledge, to the importance of making space to that heart-to-heart relationship, on the sacrality of creation, and on that Dharma concept, on that rule, the need of love. So thank you very much for being with us today. Now, our next speaker is Rabbi Alison Zakharov. She's the Associate Director of Interreligious Affairs at the American Jewish Committee based in New York City and active worldwide. She has over a decade of experience in interfaith work, having studied Judaism in Jerusalem, engaged in interreligious dialogue with Catholic clergy in Rome, and explored Islam and Christian-Muslim relations. And also, she's been trained at the rabbinate for the rabbinate at the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College. So thank you for being with us today, Rabbi Alison. From your perspective, how can women of faith cultivate authentic dialogue and encounter across religious boundaries, helping their communities overcome prejudice, fear, and division? Over to you.
Women have immense power in the dialogue space, right? We know that. None of that is shocking to those of us in the room. And I'll argue that that power does not come simply from our sex, but from the fact that anybody who's engaging in this dialogue work, who has pure intentions and a willingness to listen, brings different life experiences, and women are no different. As a rabbi, a Jewish leader, I find myself often inspired by the Jewish tradition of healthy disagreement and strive to bring that to my interfaith work in different ways. So let's speak first of women. In my Judaism, all humans, men, women, all expressions, all religious backgrounds, are created B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God. And that means that every single human life has worth. Every one of us has the spark of the divine. And that's really easy when I like someone, and that's harder to remember when I disagree with someone. And that's particularly hard to remember when someone hates me for who I am. And so there will always be a limit on who we can engage in dialogue, but we have to try to push our boundaries within reason to engage across lines of difference. I don't believe women are inherently better at this than our male counterparts. We're not necessarily better at relationships, better at hospitality. Some are, some really aren't, right? We're all individuals. But all of the spaces associated with peace building need innovation. If we had figured it out, we'd be good by now. We need new ideas and we need new perspectives. And so when we work on interreligious dialogue, when we work on peace building, the more folks we can get in the room to think it through, the better. We as women do have a specific benefit to bring in that we, like many other groups, know what it feels like to be on the outside. We know what it feels like to be treated as less than or perhaps less worthy of leading. And certainly even in my lifetime, the world has changed for the better. Women have more opportunities. But that type of gut knowledge, which I feel also as a Jew, that gut knowledge of being on the outside, of somehow not being in the leadership inner circle, brings often an empathy, a kindness that we can see when we're seeing other folks on the outside. In Judaism, we say, you were slaves in Egypt, and so you must free the slaves of your time. Whoever is oppressed, you must free them. It also reminds us as women on the outside, it brings often a scrappiness. I know we're doing translation. I'm sorry, that's the only word I can think of. We know sometimes the only way to get something done is to kind of push our ways forward respectfully and appropriately, right? There's a scrappiness that comes with being on the outside, which can benefit the work. And so peace and dialogue changing our perceptions, and yes, in this room doing interfaith dialogue included, have blind spots and prejudices to overcome, need to do the active work of building peace. And it starts with us, it starts with our inner intention, and it involves sacrifice and it involves humility. It involves remembering that every one of us has something yet to learn from the people we encounter, which again is easy to say and harder to do. So that's the benefit we bring as women. So how do we practically then move towards greater peace? We absolutely must look to the wisdom in each of our traditions. Each of our traditions brings so much beauty. And the one I want to bring from Judaism today is this concept of machloket l'shem shemayim, disagreement for the sake of heaven. In Judaism, disagreement is not seen as a threat, but seen as a very holy thing when it's done correctly. You may know that the central text of Judaism, the Torah, which was given to Moses on Mount Sinai, or perhaps inspired by God, written by humans, Judaism didn't stop with the Torah. There were commentaries on commentaries on commentaries that continue even until today. And one of the major ways we look at our tradition is through something called the Talmud. There were two versions, Talmud Bavli, the Babylonian Talmud, which was composed in modern-day Iraq, and the Talmud Yerushalmi, the Jerusalem Talmud, actually composed more in northern Israel. But we have these different versions compiled around the year 200 to the 8th century, just to give you in time period. And so in the Talmud, we see something pretty incredible. The Talmud includes different parts, including the Mishnah and the Gemara. The Mishnah, so the first line of all of this opens with Me'ematai karinet shema be'arvit. From what time do we say the evening Shema prayer? From what time do we say the prayer? The entire Talmud opens with a question. But what's incredible is the answers that we preserve, because there's not one answer given, there's many answers given. And so even though communities ultimately choose from what time we say the evening Shema, my tradition, Judaism, felt it was important enough to preserve the dissenting opinions and study them all these years later. And so what this can teach us is that even when it's hard, disagreement is essential to moving the world forward. Machloket l'shem shamayim, disagreement for the sake of heaven. In Judaism, there's often a foil set up between someone named Hillel, who was a more lenient ruler, and Shammai, who was a more stringent decider on Jewish law. And they disagreed, and this is set up a lot in our tradition. And yet, they would eat together, and their families would marry together. There was a unity in that disagreement. And so I try to embody this in my work every day. I'm fortunate to have one of the few positions doing interreligious work in the Jewish world on the global level, working for American Jewish Committee, which is the global advocacy organization for the Jewish people. And it is tough, right? If this were easy work, we would have solved it already. One example I just want to give is something that came out in partnership on the national level between AJC and the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. AJC, my organization, puts out a resource that's a glossary of common anti-Semitic terms and why they are problematic so that folks can learn from them. A little over a year ago, we partnered with the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops to create a version of Translate Hate called Translate Hate, the Catholic Edition. And what the bishops did in this was offer commentary on several of these anti-Semitic tropes to help Catholics understand, from a Catholic perspective, why they were problematic. Even though this predated my time at AJC, I'm still fairly new to AJC, you can see in the document incredible the amount of wrestling that must have gone on to understand each other's perspectives, to understand what AJC and what the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops were feeling in that moment, and the resources online if you want to take a look at that. It's those kinds of projects that can really move us forward in a concrete way if we're genuinely willing to listen, not listen to respond, not listen to correct, listen to understand. And so my wish for us all, let us be the leaders we wish we had. Let us as women go out and find new ways to rebuild trust and foster this culture of encounter we talk about so much. And let's do it through the beautiful, holy, sacred work of disagreement. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that energy and that fresh perspective. And I would underline the idea of that healthy disagreement, right? The disagreement for the sake of heaven. And for that need to look into the wisdom of our faiths. Thank you so much for all those insights, Rabbi Alison. Now, moving on to the ecumenical perspective, I am pleased to introduce you to Carla Kiyoyan. She is a program executive for the Middle East and at the World Council of Churches in Geneva, where her work focuses on peace building, interfaith diplomacy, and international advocacy, including leading initiatives that promote justice, reconciliation, and the protection of vulnerable communities across the region. So she was born in Lebanon of Armenian heritage, so she brings deep personal insights to her work. Now, Carla, thank you for joining us today. Based on your experience, how can women of faith help rebuild trust and foster a culture of encounter within their communities and across religious boundaries?
Thank you, Lavinia. Dear participants, sisters and brothers, I must start by admitting that for me today, the specific moment, speaking about trust, encounter, peace, and hope is not easy. It is actually deeply challenging. It is challenging on a very personal level, coming from a region where war, violence, and uncertainty once again are shaping the lives of millions of people. It is challenging when your homeland is shaken by conflict, when the lives of those you love are under threat, and when fear and instability disturb even the most basic sense of peace in one's heart. So very humbly together with you, I find myself asking these questions. How do we speak about trust, encounter, peace, and hope when our families, our friends, and our communities live under the constant shadow of death, struggling simply to survive? How do we speak about hope when our souls are troubled by fear and uncertainty, and when peace feels distant and fragile? How do we speak of hope when families are torn apart by war, when tomorrow cannot be planned, and even the simple dream of reunion with the loved ones feel uncertain? When parents lie awake wondering what kind of future awaits their children, and when the horizon seems filled not with promises, but with questions. In moments like these, hope feels fragile, almost beyond reach. And yet, perhaps it is precisely in such moments that hope reveals its deepest meaning. Hope does not mean that we are denying suffering, nor the illusion that everything will suddenly begin. Hope is the quiet but stubborn conviction that even in the midst of fear, uncertainty, and trouble, humanity can still choose compassion over hatred, solidarity over indifference, and peace over violence. For many communities across the Middle East today, hope does not appear in grand political declarations or distant promises. More often, it takes the humble, quiet forms: a family protecting one another, neighbors supporting each other, and faith communities standing together in prayer and solidarity. And women who continue nurturing life and dignity even when the world around seems to be collapsing. We gather today at a moment of escalating violence that is shaping several parts of my region, bringing profound humanitarian, social, and political consequences for the people who call this area of the world their home. In such moments, the voice of faith carries a particular responsibility. At a moment when the language of war speaks of defeating, destroying, erasing the other, the language of faith speaks differently. Where others speaks of enemies, faith calls us to recognize neighbors. Where walls are raised by fear and hatred, faith invites us to build bridges and encounter. And where violence denies the humanity of the other, faith reminds us that every human being is created with dignity and is worthy of respect, compassion, and love. As women of faith, we are often called to embody this commitment in very practical ways. Women are frequently present where suffering is most visible, in families, communities, and in our daily life, in our societies. They care for the wounded, sustain communities during crisis, and preserve hope when institutions fail. Women of faith play a powerful role in fostering dialogue through education, community engagement, and faith-based initiatives. Authentic dialogue and trust begins not with theological debate, but with encounter, with listening, sharing stories, and recognizing the humanity of the other. In a world where polarization and mistrust are growing, these spaces of encounter are more important than ever. At the same time, our world is facing multiple and interconnected crises like climate change, forced migration, economic inequality. In these circumstances, women of faith are also among the first to respond. Another crucial dimension of our work concerns the younger generation. Today's young people are growing up in a world marked by uncertainty, rapid change, and often very deep frustration. Many of them feel disconnected from the traditional institutions and are searching for meaning and purpose. Women of faith can play a role in accompanying young people in this search by creating spaces of dialogue, encouraging critical thinking, and involving young people in concrete initiatives for justice and service, and to discover their own vocation as agents of peace. However, for women to fully contribute to these efforts, they must also be recognized and supported as leaders. Too often, we carry the burden of sustaining communities during crisis, but remain excluded from decision-making processes. If we are serious about building sustainable peace, then women must be present not only in humanitarian work and grassroots initiatives, but also in the tables where policies and strategies are shaped. Sometimes, and specifically today, I allow myself to imagine a different world. Imagine with me if More women were present at the tables where decisions about war and peace are made. Imagine if today, at this moment, in Washington, in Tehran, in Jerusalem, and in Beirut, and beyond, women of faith carry the responsibility of guiding nations through these moments of crisis. Imagine the kind of conversations that might take place, the questions that might be asked, and the lives that might be spared. I confess that today I carry that dream, a dream of a world where women presidents, women prime ministers, and women of faith help shape the destiny of our societies. A world where leadership is measured not only by power but by wisdom, not by strength but by compassion, and not only by strategy but by conscience. A world where the language of domination gives way to the language of care, where tenderness is not dismissed as weakness, but it is recognized as a form of courage, where dialogue replaces destruction, and where the dignity of every human life becomes the first and the last measure of any political decision. Perhaps such a world would be more logical, perhaps it would be more humane, and perhaps it would be more beautiful than what we have today. But above all, it would be a world where love is not naive, where peace is not impossible, and where hope is not fragile. And perhaps the future of our world depends on our willingness to believe that such a dream is not beyond our reach. Thank you.
Thank you, Carla, for that moving sharing, really. I think, we can say that solidarity and dialogue can prevail, and that women are in the front line, and our role in fostering dialogue, mediation, and listening is so crucial. And also, you mentioned our role in accompanying younger generations, which is so important. So thank you also for making us dream a bit this afternoon. Thank you. And finally, representing the Catholic perspective, I am pleased to introduce Dr. Stephanie Wong. She is a professor at Villanova University of Interreligious Relations and Comparative Theology, focusing especially on Catholic and Chinese religious cultural traditions. She also serves on the board of Interfaith Philadelphia, which promotes long-term interreligious understanding between the religious communities. So, Stephanie, in a world marked by growing polarization, conflict, and fear of the other, how can we help rebuild trust and foster a culture of encounter within our communities?
Yes, we live in a time when many societies are increasingly fragmented by both fear and resentment of the other, religious, national, ethnic, ideological, political. But we're gathered here in the conviction that religious difference itself is not the problem, but rather the absence of generous engagement across that diversity. And what rebuilds trust, therefore, is not simply tolerance towards the other's existence, nor even education about the other, but encounter. Whereas fear thrives in abstraction, trust arises in lived relationships. So I want to point out three reasons that women of faith can play an especially important role in rebuilding that trust. First, as we've all been saying, women already function as informal bridge builders through family networks, community service, education, and care for vulnerable people. These spaces often become natural sites of interreligious contact long before formal dialogue begins, as people cook together, share stories about their children, collaborate in service, and so on. But what I'd like to stress is that this informal bridge building is valuable because it includes not only crying and working together in hard times, but also hopefully laughing and celebrating together when that's possible. Very often, people imagine that interreligious efforts for peace become important and most useful when there's some horrific crisis that needs ameliorating. And then men in suits or collars gather at conference tables. But we all know that trust is tough to build in crisis moments, and when the crisis has hit, as our world is experiencing now, in many ways it's too late to build trust. It's far easier to trust and be trusted in the wake of a natural disaster or a war strike or a funeral if you've also already been there for each other's festivals, family celebrations, or ordinary activities like helping each other's kids home from school. So I want to stress the importance of women and not just showing up in the bad times, which are plenty, but also when there are precious good times. Second, women of faith often nurture what we theologians call the moral imagination, the ability to envision a world beyond conflict and exclusion. The philosopher and theologian Raymond Panikar, referenced earlier also, argued that authentic dialogue begins with an intra-religious dialogue. And by this, he meant a deepening of one's own spiritual tradition and conversation with others. Certainly in my own life, as a scholar of Catholic theology and Chinese religions, I found my studies of the Chinese Taoist tradition to be especially helpful, especially corrective, in resensitizing me to the realities of human vulnerability. For example, I've often struggled to overcome the tendency, perhaps it's a general human psychological one, but there are elements of Christian theology and Christology that may be especially liable to this. The tendency to want to explain human suffering and make it seem rational. Surely there's some cosmic or divine justice by which the universe makes things fair or tracks with who's innocent and good and deserving of this, or wrong and bad and deserving of that. In fact, while Christian scriptures certainly maintain a hope of true justice, wisdom literature like the Book of Job point out the spiritual arrogance of imagining we humans can explain away suffering, or the dangerous immaturity of trying to plot out or manipulate our own or others' outcomes. So for me, it's really been in delving deep into philosophical Taoist texts like the Zhuangzi, which are constantly poking fun at the human tendency to reify conventional logics of cause and effect, texts which are pointing out how this is really a form of epistemic violence. It's in doing this and incorporating the Zhuangzi into my own Catholic spirituality that has helped to dislodge the egocentric or self-righteous impulse to assume that I know how things ought to be. Nonetheless, this type of cultivation of a better moral imagination doesn't have to be an academic exercise, and more generally, it requires the sort of synthetic experience that women live all the time in holding together multiple concerns and multiple roles. For me, surely the real test of whether I've grown in how little I understand of how the universe works, if I've grown in any humility, that test arises in trying to live it humbly as a daughter to some, a teacher to others, a wife to another, colleague, mother, nonprofit supporter, researcher, and in so many myriad roles where we don't always know, but are trying to imagine a greater good. So my point is, women can lean into this synthetic nature of our lives, whatever the elements that may make up our particular lives, whether it's studying interreligiously sacred texts of different traditions, holding together an interreligious family, trying to translate between governmental and educational and religious institutions. It's in this work of synthesis, connecting, bringing together, where we can offer, hopefully, a moral imagination that's not just reproducing whatever structures of power already exist, but hopefully, possibly offering an alternative vision and how to live in and care for the world. Finally, concretely, I'd like to suggest that we must take courage to act amid uncertainty, since our words and actions do form how the next generations gauge what is true and worthwhile. There are so many reasons to feel that it's all futile. In this media digital environment where fact and fiction are hard to distinguish, in this context where leaders seem hypocritical more often than not, in moments like now where aggressive violence is spiraling, it's so hard to feel a sense of any agency. But as a Christian, I find some solace in Jesus' insistence in Matthew 25 that small actions do matter. He talks about the importance of having acted. I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. I was naked and you gave me clothing. Jesus continues in this passage to contrast the realities when people did not do those things. Action matters. And I think we're at a moment where perhaps religious communities of all sorts have to shore up confidence that that is true. Now, I heartily agree with what Dr. Charika Masinge was saying earlier about the rather terrifying extent to which digital engagement seems more authoritative to many young people than three-dimensional human encounter. But recently, I read an interesting article on spiritual development and its challenges, especially in the West, where I'm located. All in all, it was a rather sobering article, noting that adults often unwittingly teach children a secularizing hierarchy of values. Even very faithful parents tend to present matters of religion in a hedging way. Well, we believe that God exists, or, well, the temple tells us to take care of earth and all sentient beings. But they tend to communicate in a much more simple and confident way their assumption, for instance, that the germ theory of disease is true, saying simply, always wash your hands before meals. Or perhaps they don't even say anything, but just make it an incontrovertible habit that everybody does wash their hands before meals. This was ironic, since even if parents mean to present the religious conviction as the highest sort of sacred truth, kids often take away the opposite impression, that the former is a matter of assertion, while the latter is a matter of acted upon fact. Nonetheless, I think perhaps the good news or the interesting takeaway from this case study for religious communities and for any of us women who are leaders or literal or spiritual teachers or mothers is that our little habits of speech and action clearly do remain tremendously powerful, and they still do shape what the next generation thinks is real and true and possible. So let's embrace the concrete agency we do have in our patterns of speech and action. The polarized rhetorical and literal wars are raging around us. If we do always pause to offer hospitality to the stranger, or to check on the person looking ill on the side of the street, to recycle the plastic water bottle, to speak up and protest when we hear someone demeaned, we are shaping the next generation's sense of reality and moral sensibility for what is done versus not done. And this is spiritual work. In sum, I do believe women remain well positioned to envision and to realize the world more as it ought to be. Already building bridges in ordinary life, having myriad experiences and roles through which we can synthetically cultivate a moral imagination, and having opportunities every day to still act in whatever large or small ways we can to realize what we hold to be true. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie, for underlining that relation between spirituality and the human suffering, for reminding you that actions actually matter, and the importance of having the courage to act even in the midst of uncertainty. So thank you very much to all of our speakers today. Now, before wrapping up, allow me to give the floor to Monica, the president of WUCWO, for some quick closing remarks. Monica.
Okay, thank you, Lavinia. Well, I'm really amazed and so happy and so hopeful. We have so much in common. We are looking basically for the same things, and we are convinced of the way to go along. So before thanking everyone, I just want to highlight some small phrases or ideas. It is really difficult. It's so much that has been said here today. But I just want to highlight some ideas. Mr. Dunia Elementar, from the Islamic perspective, told us something I think is very strong. To break this cycle, we need a moral courage that goes beyond political calculations. We need the courage to forgive, the courage to build bridges, and the courage to rehumanize those whom conflict has turned into the other. I think that is resumes many things. It says, yet forgiveness as alone is not enough. We also need solidarity, and here women have a unique spiritual role. From the Buddhist perspective, well, we listen to so many rich things, but I like something very much. It says, Therefore, the most opportune moment has arrived for women of all faith traditions to offer the world a feminine roadmap, one rooted not in domination, but in shared power, not in division, but in unity, not in violence, but in peace. From the smallest social unity of the family to national and international spheres of authority, a new paradigm is urgently needed. As women of faith, we are called to articulate spiritual frameworks that transcend divides, disparities, frameworks that safeguard the right to life and dignity, not only for human beings, but also for fauna, flora, and the very air we breathe. It's very, very beautiful. Rabbi Ellison was very, very motivated. I like the way she spoke about the disagreement, which is very, very natural and very rich. I was thinking about last year, the Catholic Church, well, not last year, for many years, we've been in a synodal process to learn how to listen to each other, even if we have differences, how to really start dialing and having a discernment, because we don't listen to ourselves. We start listening and trying to understand the other. So I think it is very important. As you say, women and men were both created at the image of God, and we need new ideas, of course, and new ways. We need to start with humility, and we have all something to do, all something to change, of course. All of us have prejudices, things this is a lifelong commitment that we have to change every day. So thank you, Alison, for letting us know that. From the Hindu perspective, so many beautiful things about knowledge, compassion, empathy, violence, common and shared values, the community services that we do that are very, very important, where we get together. As she said, women bring stories, traditions, things that help us overcome our differences. We are a unique, only one family, which is very, very important. And we have to look for the well-being of all, including creation. So we have to go through solving commitments, and we have to save the world, the cosmos, everything. Parla, we all embrace you. We know there are difficult moments, and hope, as you say, is consistent, is stubborn. So we are stubbornly hopeful that things are going to get better, that with the faith, we are going to change the enemies into neighbors, the violence into the respect for every woman's dignity. We're women of faith, and we know that we can change humanity and that things are going to change. And we are praying together and working for it together. How to say, your suffering is ours. And we know many, many people are suffering, and we suffer with you together. But together with you, we're going to change things. Well, and then I have the Catholic perspective, but we've been saying so many things about the Catholic perspective. But Stephanie, you said so many good things. These three ideas that it's the informal bridges builders is very, very important. I was very impressed when you said that if we want to get together where things are already complicated, then it's going to be much more difficult. Let's get together in simple things. Let's go and have parties together, and then it's going to be much more easy to get together when things become difficult. Of course, this moral imagination you talked about is very, very important. And then the importance of the small things that we do. I mean, as you say, in some, women are well positioned to envision and realize the world more as it ought to be. Already building bridges in ordinary life, having mirrored experiences and roles through which to cultivate a synthetic moral imagination with opportunities every day to act and those realize what we believe, especially for the benefit of the future generations. And I don't want us to forget the idea that we need to have women leaders in the different spheres, not only where the things are done, but also where the decisions are made. I think that's very, very important. We women have to be working together hand in hand with men, of course, because we are not, as Rabbi said, we are not better because we're women or better because we're men. We are all human beings and we can all help. But of course, there's a lot. If women, I started imagining what would happen if more women would have been in tables deciding all these issues that are being decided now in the conflicts around the world. So we have to get more women of faith there. So many things to say, but I cannot go on. So I just, after listening and learning so much, all that remains is for me to thank once again Cardinal Kubakat, our panelists, WUCWO Secretary General Lavinia Rocky, who really worked very, very hard for this encounter. Thank you, Lavinia. The people from the Dicastery, thank you all. Our gratitude to the speakers for sharing their valuable testimonies with us, what they feel, what they think, not only knowledge, and their experiences. And then I encourage you all to continue walking together on this path of prayer, service, and dialogue for peace, convinced with hope that peace is always possible. So deeply rooted in our faith, let us go and fill our wounded world with love, hope, and peace. Thank you. Gracias a todas. Merci beaucoup. Thank you. Have a good day, night, or afternoon.
Thank you, Monica. I don't know if the Cardinal, Your Eminence, you want to say something. I'm not sure if you have any final remarks.
No, I just want to thank you once again for this opportunity. This is for the first time I participate, and really interesting that such a sincere, well-studied, well-prepared sharing that you prepared, that really we need to continue, because not only we just share ideas, we form minds, we put together our convictions, and we have to move forward and tell the world that peace is possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for those closing remarks. Let us continue walking together in this dialogue and in this encounter of peace and hope. On behalf of WUCWO, I extend really our gratitude to the Dicastery for Interreligious Dialogue and to Your Eminence for your support and for your collaboration. I also thank all of our friends, our speakers today, for their testimonies, their experiences. They were really deep and beautiful. So thank you. Thank you to our interpreters, to all my colleagues that supported and helped me in organizing the webinar, and the over 200 participants that are connected from across the world attending this gathering today. Thank you for being with us. I wish you all peace. Thank you. Have a nice afternoon and a nice evening.
All the best wishes of the day.